Audit Committee. This meeting is being held remotely and also in person and will be filmed and recorded for live and subsequent broadcast available through the Council's website. The Council is a data controller under the General Protection Regulations and Data Protection Act 2018. We broadcast and record Council meetings to fulfil our public task obligation to enable members of the public to observe the democratic process. Data collected during the process will be retained in accordance with the Council's published policies available through the Council's website. Members of the Council are reminded that they should follow the Council's established meeting protocols, including around the use of the chat facility, and that comments made in the chat facility are visible to all participants in the meeting, which may include members of the public who have also received invites to the meeting. Have any apologies?
Apologies for absence have been intimated. Could we now move to a roll call? The following members please indicate if they are present at the meeting either in person or remotely. Councillor Clover.
In chamber.
Councillor McCabe.
Present chamber.
Councillor McCluskey.
Present remotely.
Councillor McCormick.
Present remotely.
Councillor Maguire.
Present remotely.
Thomas Mackenzie.
Chamber.
Councillor McVeigh.
In chamber.
Councillor Nelson.
In chamber.
Councillor Reynolds.
Present remotely.
Councillor Robertson.
Present in the chamber.
Councillor Wilson.
Present remotely.
Are there any declarations of interest?
Okay, move on to the first paper, the Internal Audit Progress Report. Andy?
Thanks, Chair. Can you hear me okay in chambers?
Yes, clearly.
Thanks, Chair. So this report sets out the internal audit activity since the last progress update to committee in October. There were 2 reviews finalised since the last update, which are set out at section 2 of Appendix 1 to the report. In relation to the first review in relation to quarterly checks of corporate purchase cards, the overall control environment opinion was satisfactory. There were 2 amber issues identified. Firstly, in relation to providing guidance on VAT to corporate purchase card holders. And secondly, there was a lack of sign-off of some corporate purchase card statements by supervisors. There were 3 issues identified and an action plan is in place to address all issues by the 31st of March. We also finalised the audit of attendance management. Overall, the control environment requires improvement, and that was due to systemic control weaknesses identified in the process. The audit identified 1 red and 4 amber issues as follows. The red issue identified was in relation to how the system is currently configured. System constraints require a multi-step manual process to be carried out in order to notify, record and monitor absences. This has led to manual processes being put in place which are not efficient and are prone to human error, and absence data requiring to be handled by a number of different members of staff. The next amber issue was in relation to training for attendance management, and it's not been undertaken by all managers responsible. However, within education services, training has been undertaken in 2023, and in relation to HSCP, training for managers has recently started and is ongoing. Thirdly, there's a new occupational health service provider that was procured in October 2022, and this would allow self-referral for occupational health assessments by managers. Work was required to be undertaken to review the management hierarchies within the system before the self-referral process could be undertaken by managers. However, at the time of the audit, this work was outstanding for the HSCP, resulting in HR continuing to undertake this process in the meantime. Fourthly, absence reports can be generated from the system. However, audit testing identified that for the 4 service areas reviewed, managers do not have system access to run such reports. And finally, in relation to records retention, the audit identified that timescales for retention of service-based attendance records were not being adhered to within the 4 service areas tested, and for some service areas there were also hard copy and electronic records being retained by services which are not necessary. There were 6 issues identified, and an action plan is in place to address all issues by the 30th of June. In relation to the overall progress for the audit plan, this is set out at section 3 of the report in relation to the audit of ASN Transport. Although the planning has been carried out, fieldwork has been deferred to the 24-25 audit plan due to an internal review which is currently being carried out by management. In relation to corporate fraud, we continue to review matches received through the National Fraud Initiative, and we respond to other referrals and whistleblowing inquiries as they arise. This has resulted in a number of overpayments being identified, which are now subject to formal recovery. For the National Fraud Initiative, we've received a high number of new matches in November. These are in relation to Council Tax Reduction Scheme and HMRC data, which is now being progressed. And for internal audit action plans, this is set out at section 2 of the status report. There were 5 actions due for completion by the 31st of October. 4 are complete, and the completion date in relation to 1 action has been revised. This relates to the development of homelessness policies and procedures. Management comments have been provided within the relevant section of the status report. Happy to take any questions on the update today, Convener. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go on any further, could I ask Councillor Wilson, Councillor McCormick, if they could please mute, because we're getting quite a lot of noise through. I don't know what's comes from. So, any questions from members?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Hang on.
Thank you, Convener.
Councillor
It's actually,
speaking.
just on 2.10, and it mentions there about the average attendance target is currently 9 days. Now, we are aware that there are members who may be suffering from long COVID and could potentially be taking more time off. Has that been factored in any way? Because that could quite clearly skew figures. Thank you.
Andy?
Through you, Chair, it's probably not a question for me. It's probably more one for Morna Ruth
Okay.
in the room.
Thanks.
Happy to take that. Thank you, Convener. So yes, those absence figures will include all cases of sickness absence. That could include long COVID absence as well. There has been a change in the way that we are recording sickness absence. Previously, COVID absence was distinct in previous years. Now it's included all in one. So you're right, long COVID could be a factor in terms of sickness absence.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. Excellent report and extremely comprehensive. My question is probably, is Louise in the chamber today?
Yeah.
With regard to the credit card question and the administration of it by management, and with regard to the attendance management, again, the processing of that, the management, it seems to me that the management has been rather lacklustre and haven't really been performing their jobs properly. I'd welcome your comment, Chief Executive.
Through yourself, Convener. So 2 different things there. In relation to the credit management, when we talk about credit management, what we're talking about is our children's houses have credit cards and the supervisor sign that off, and the spend in relation to that. I mean, Andy can come in. We don't have dozens of credit cards, corporate cards across the council. In fact, for the councillor side, we have a very small number of corporate credit cards. In relation to the attendance management, there are a number of issues which are about process in relation to the attendance management, which have been picked up by Andy and our internal auditors. Just to give some reassurance, Morna and Ruth have an action plan. You remember the action plan that came out of the HR review? They meet regularly with one another, and they also meet regularly with me to report the data to make sure that the improvements, because there was a number of improvements to the HR review, and this is now included in that comprehensive plan which is on Santana.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Councillor Wilson?
Well, it says that action has to be taken. It really has been quite sloppy, and I'm pleased to hear that we seem to be on top of it now. But I look forward to your follow-ups, Andy, on these.
Okay. Councillor McCluskey.
Thanks, Chair. My question just relates to the appendix and the ongoing action on high mileage claims.
I'm just wondering, it's noted in the report, and thanks Andy for the report, that the original due date was missed. I'm just wondering, has that, my reading of that is it's still not being completed, and I was just wondering if there could just be some clarity on that and when we would expect that to be completed and what the outcome will be.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Stuart?
We've taken corrective action, Councillor McCluskey, in terms of a number of the users whereby they were using their own vehicles, and what they now have is fleet vehicles. Where we have addressed a number of the issues, the action is not fully complete, and there will be a report to the corporate management team early this year, which will then in turn inform the process better for the Audit Committee.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Me next?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I have to say that the attendance management section of the report doesn't make good reading. We don't often get reports that require improvement. We certainly don't often get red issues being highlighted. It certainly doesn't reflect very well on the council and our various services. So I do know there is a detailed action plan, obviously, in the report to address the issues, but I think it's very important that we do address these issues within the timescales that are set out in the action plan. I don't want to see any slippage in these actions, because the information that we get through the attendance management system is very important information for the organisation. We report it to elected members, we report it publicly, we report it to the government as well, and we need to be able to rely on the attendance management information that's been reported. So we really do need to make sure that we address these issues as soon as possible.
Councillor McVeigh?
Yeah, thank you, Convener. Two questions, please. One to the Chief Auditor, one to the Chief Executive. Andy, page 28, first item, page 28, homelessness. This report was brought by yourself 2.5 years ago, issued in August 21, and myself have questions to several occasions why it's not complete. So after 2.5 years and 6 deadlines, I wonder if there's any point in continuing to ask these questions and you yourself to bring the report. I just would like your views on that, please.
Indeed.
And to the Chief Executive, I think a couple of times I've asked that when deadlines are missed, we have a reason for that contained in the report, and I'm just wondering why that's not happened yet. Thank you, Convener.
Andy?
Through yourself, Chair. So thanks for your question, Councillor McVeigh. And just as I have updated in previous committees, the CMT do robustly look at this report, and I'm not sure if Kate's on in chambers today and would be able to provide an update in terms of why there's been another delay in terms of finalising that particular action. But in terms of the audit process, when we do the annual report, which will come to committee in June, I would make a decision at that point in terms of whether the audit follow-up process or whether there are any remaining audit actions which need to go on as a governance issue. I would make that recommendation within the annual report for Audit Committee to conclude on whether this action now needs to go in as a governance issue within the Council's annual governance statement. But if Kate's in the room, she might be able to give you more of an update in terms of the remedial action that is ongoing for this particular case. Thanks.
Through yourself, Convener, and thank you very much, Councillor McVeigh. Kate's not in the room. There is an action in relation. There's elements of that that are complete and have been complete for a number of months. The issue in relation to it, and we know because we've discussed it as a corporate management team, is the right management policy needs to go, and there's been some work done between revenues and the redesign of the homeless service to think about what that might look like. And then there needs to be a piece of work for that to come back. We're having an ongoing discussion about homelessness and its totality, not just this element of it. And I'm happy to report back. I think you're right, Councillor McVeigh did say if we missed something, we would maybe highlight why we'd missed it. and I'll endeavour to make sure that we add a section next to the mandatory commentaries when there's a missed deadline, so that you can see why it's been missed and there's some explanation in relation to that.
Thank you.
Councillor McCluskey. No, sir, Maguire.
I had the same question as Councillor McVeigh about the homeless service, and I was going to ask about that due date of the 31st of January, but I feel like you have answered it. On page 14, my second question was around the National Fraud Initiative. The audio broke up ever so slightly when you were saying about the new slew of matches in November, so apologies if this has already been answered. Was there any particular reason why we've seen such an influx in November? Because it's quite late in the year for that to be coming through. And do we have enough resource to investigate these fully? Because I'm aware that the number is considerably higher now than it was before.
Andy.
Thanks, Chair. So thanks for your question, Councillor Maguire. And this is just a new data set that's come on through the National Fraud Initiative, and it's in relation to HMRC data. So there was quite a delay in getting the data sharing protocols approved and through the Cabinet Office, which is why it's so late in the day for us to get these matches in. We've had a look at the three different reports, and one of the investigators attends the local authority investigators group. So just to give some assurance, we're one of many councils that have received quite an influx of additional matches. So these matches in particular are looking at council tax reduction scheme, and where there is potential that applications received and approved by councils, they may be subject to some scrutiny, where HMRC have other information relating to household composition, property, assets or capital that has not been declared through the council applications. So we are working our way through that. We will have another 12 to 18 months before this data set is effectively archived. So we do have another 18 months to look at this information. So I'm confident the team will be able to work through these matches. We do prioritise it based on the fraud risk category. The system tells us which matches are deemed to be higher risk. So we will focus our resources on investigating higher risk matches initially, and then we'll pick up in the medium and lower matches as the year progresses. Hopefully that gives you some assurance on that, Councillor Maguire. Thank you.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions?
No, sorry.
Okay, no further questions. Then move on to agenda item number 3, the external audit action plans, current items. Andy?
Thanks, Chair. So this report just gives an update on the external audit action plans. There were no actions due for the 31st of October. The report that's attached at the appendix has been updated for those actions arising from the annual report to members on the 22-23 audit, which also included a review of some aspects of the Council's best value arrangements. There are currently 15 actions being progressed by officers, and the follow-up report is set out at Appendix 1. Happy to take any questions on the report. Thank you, Chair.
Questions from members? Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, 2 questions, Andy. With regards to the local development plan, who's conducting the work on that?
Stuart Johnson.
Through you, Convener. As members are aware, we've carried out a tender exercise with regards to providing us with some consultant support. The award has not been made to the contractor yet, but we also have a new head of regeneration planning and public protection who is very experienced in the production of local development plans, and he's starting with the council in March. Bearing in mind the appointment that has been made, We're engaging with him ahead of the plan to ensure that he's comfortable with the approach that we're taking and to see if we can simplify the approach with his experience. He's currently sitting with 3 local development plans against his name, Councillor Wilson, and it would be remiss of us not to tap into that font of knowledge.
Thank you.
I look forward to. Could I have a supplementary, please, Chair?
Pardon?
Could I have a supplementary question?
Yes, carry on.
At page 32, 3.2, and I meant to ask this at the previous one when we were talking about attendance figures and the VAT on the credit card. It says here the Chief Internal Auditor coordinates follow-up reporting on current actions arising from internal audit action plans with regular reporting to the CMT. How regularly do you report to the CMT, Andy?
Andy?
Through yourself, Chair. So ahead of every audit committee meeting, I take a full detailed report to the corporate management team for information and comment prior to it coming to audit committee. That's really to ensure that the information, the updates that are contained in the various sections are as up to date as possible, particularly for those actions that are in the future. But where there's a management comment that's merited, because it's likely, you know, these questions will be asked at audit committee. So ahead of every committee, I will go to CMT formally to take this report to them. So hopefully that gives you some assurance in that process, Councillor Wilson.
I would probably like to see it more often, but thank you very much for that, Andy.
Thank you. Stephen, I see your lights on, is it? No.
Right, switch off, so
That's okay. Is there any further questions from members on this paper? Yep. We move on to agenda item number 4, which is the corporate risk register.
Okay, yep, thank you, through you, Convener. So members will be aware that there was a revised risk management strategy approved through the Audit Committee and then P&R in November. So on the back of that, we reviewed Committee Directorate Service Project Risk Registers to compile a refreshed version of the Corporate Risk Register as set out in terms of the strategy. So it's been through CMT, we're bringing it here for your consideration prior to going on to P&R next month. What we've done is, I included in, as I said in the report, a baseline risk appetite level of 10. So we've included risk scored above that. There will be further work around training on risk management for elected members, officers, and on the council's risk appetite. And that will help inform future iterations of this register. And what I would say is that it's sort of living and breathing, if you like. I mean, we had a meeting of the corporate risk management group this morning. So probably before this even goes to P&R, there'll be some updating of the current and planned actions to reflect other work that we've done recently and will be doing. But I'm very happy to take any questions.
Yeah. First question from McCluskey.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you for providing this paper. It's very helpful, and I think it's a useful development that we get to see this now. I've just got 2 questions on process, and then just a general question on some of the specifics within the risk register itself. The first question on process is just around the risk appetite. I'm just wondering if a little further information can be given around the timelines for developing the risk appetite statement. And the second is just in terms of the report being provided as well to P&R, I just be keen to understand the thinking behind that. Is the idea that P&R is taking kind of responsibility for this, or does that lie here at the audit committee? On the specifics, I think probably as a committee we would be most interested in the things where either there's a very high risk or whether there's been a change in risk. I don't want to dwell on the one very high risk, which I think we're all well aware of in terms of the financial pressures on the council. But in terms of the 3 risks where a change is noted in the tables, it would just be good to understand what has changed. This obviously been the first time we've seen it. It'd be good to understand with workforce, information governance, and especially with the threat of cyber attack, which, if I'm reading it correctly, has increased from 4 to 12. Just what has prompted those increases and those risks. And then very finally, I think I'm right in thinking I'd just like to have this confirmed that any changes, given that we're only going to see the corporate risk register, I think twice a year, that any changes to any of these risks or any additions will just be reported to the committee if they happen between committee sessions. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you for those questions. I'll try and take those in turn, make pause at relevant moments. Councillor McCluskey. So, in terms of the risk appetite, I think we probably need to look at that. We need to have the training, we need to have the workshop, which we said that we would, so that can be that more holistic discussion around that. And you know, we plan to have that workshop certainly within the first quarter of this calendar year, and I guess it would come out of that. We'll probably need further work around that, but that would be part of that discussion. And I think personally speaking, for me, it's more important that we further embed risk management as a priority over the risk appetite. I see that as more as helping flag up particular risks and areas where there might be additional controls needed or further work needed. But that's my thinking around that. I may bring in, see if Louise has anything she wishes to add. In terms of going to P&R, why is it going no? Well, obviously we said we moved in the strategy, but probably more importantly in terms of that being the, if you like, overarching committee in terms of having oversight responsibility for, subject to the delegation to various committees, the entirety of the council's operations. That seems the best place for it to go to an executive committee in conjunction with Audit Committee, recognising Audit Committee's particular role within the governance of the council. So that's really the thinking around that. I don't know if Jimmy wants to come in with it on any of those 2 points on the process.
Through yourself, Convener, just to say that we did discuss having a risk appetite session with elected members in the first quarter of this year. Thereafter, rolling out the training to the corporate management team, the extended corporate management team, and then cascading it through the organisation. But it's kind of a chicken and an egg. We need to have the risk appetite so that when we do the session for the staff, that they understand what the elected member's risk appetite is in order to inform some of that discussion. And just in relation to P&R, P&R is responsible for all the corporate functions, and we see the risk register as being part of that corporate function.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So then, through you, Convener, in terms of the changes, and I guess what I would say is that maybe not so much things have changed, but rather having a refresh of the corporate risk register, thinking actually what do we feel the more correct scoring, if you like, in terms of impact and likelihood is at this moment. And I think that really reflects why there's been changes as opposed to something having changed, say, in the last quarter. And as you say, and we put that in there. So with workforce, I think reducing the impact down from a 4 to a 3. Information governance, increasing it really particularly around the impact there, given the potential risk to the council's reputation, the regulatory risk, given the volume, the breadth, some of the personal data that we as an authority hold, the risk of fines to the local authority, that's reflected in that higher impact score. And equally, the threat of cyber attack, recognising the challenging environment that we now, along with our other public sector colleagues, operate within. And there's been some well publicised examples of local authorities having been the subject of successful cyber attacks. And as you know, and as the committees have reported to it separately, on the back of recent internal audit report, we've done quite a bit of work around that to help try and mitigate against those risks. So I suppose I don't see it so much as being particular changes, but rather with a refresh and having a look at it as a collective, as a CMT, what we think is perhaps now currently the more reflective scores. I don't think we would envisage reporting up changes in between relevant committee cycles, because it was going to be reported twice a year to Audit Committee and twice a year to P&R. It was once a year to P&R. I didn't envisage doing any additional reporting, but happy to be guided by others on that.
Thank you. Okay, move on to. Sorry, I've got one more here. Councillor Maguire.
Thank you very much. I was going to ask the same question about the cybersecurity risk. My second question was around a lot of the risks have been marked down as a 12 apart from one. I was just wondering, is that as just final fee? Is that just how they've been calculated out? Or is this something that possibly is going to come through the training for us?
Please.
Sorry, Councillor Maguire, you were cutting out a bit there. Could you repeat your question?
So my question is, across all the risks but one, we've been marked as a 12. It's very unusual to see in one register all the risks sitting at the same level. Is this purely a result of, you know, the calculations? Is this us finding our feet when it comes to the risk register? Or is this something that we're going to learn a bit more about when we go through our training?
I think it's, thank you, thanks for clarifying. I think it's probably partly having done a refresh, partly given the fact we've had to necessarily send the reports to group risks together on the basis of themes. So by necessity, there's sort of a blending probably of risks and mitigations there, which perhaps lends itself more to that sort of consistent scoring. And ultimately, it's a blunt tool, but hopefully it helps us and yourselves in identifying and with that collective responsibility around risk and around risk management. And ultimately, it's also guided, of course, by the scoring methodology is set out in the strategy around how we should assess impact and likelihood in terms of whether something's rare or catastrophic and so on. So it's probably a bit of both, but I don't think it's an exact science, Councillor.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you, Convener. Looking through the list of risks on page 52, I was thinking that probably one of the greater risks to the council at this present moment comes under the partnership thing. And it comes to mind about the work that the council will be doing shortly with the Levelling Up Fund and the work in the town centres. The amount of money that we're going to be spending, I think it's in the region of 21 million to remove the flyover and all the other work that goes on around about it. Now, very often what happens within the council environment, tenders go out and the companies tender for it, the bids are accepted, and then it runs out of control. So very often we find this, and the bill escalates. Now, when we're working with figures that we're going to be working with, if these bills escalate, then it puts us in a serious problem. We either don't get the job finished, or we can't afford to pay for it because with the budget being so tight as things are going. And I think what members need here is a reassurance that it says here a robust tender process with good financial management. It has to be extra robust going forward, and I think that's something we must look at very, very carefully, because I think that's the greatest risk to the council and our ambitions going forward.
Stuart Jimison, would you like to comment on that?
Through you, Convener. The Provost has highlighted the Levelling Up Fund, and whilst it is one of the largest projects that we have within Inverclyde currently, we have delivered larger projects than the Levelling Up Fund. What we have is effective management from the point of view that we have programme boards, we have consultant teams, and within any tender that we do, we always ensure that there's optimism bias within the cost line. So depending on what stages that we're at within the project will determine the level of contingency, for want of a better description. The relationship that we have with Transport Scotland is really, really high at this moment in time. The relationship that we have with the Oak Mall is really, really high, and ensuring that members are regularly updated in respect of what we're doing with the major projects is fundamental, as well as engaging with the public. So I can give reassurance that the Levelling Up Fund project is being well managed. and we will ensure that there are regular reports to members to give them that comfort.
Thank you for that. John.
Thank you, Convener. Just looking at 4.2, where it mentions there about the elected members being offered training in the early part of 2024. Now, is the early part of 2024 in the first quarter of 2024? And if that is the case, taking into account 4.3, where it states that the new corporate risk advisor will support the rollout of the risk management training, is the timescale achievable?
Thank you too, Convener. So yeah, no, certainly in the first 3 months of 2024, and we're going to get that range anyway. And even if the corporate risk advisor isn't close to that point, so we'll get that range regardless.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Councillor McCluskey, did you want to come back in again?
No, it's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Councillor McKay.
Yeah, thanks. The information is useful in terms of what's in the sub-appendix, the corporate risk register. I just think it would maybe benefit from having a sort of legend that explains the various things. So, I mean, obviously, in terms of impact and rating, from memory, I think we're talking about out of 5. I think you can say that. We're talking out of 5. What do we mean by impacts of 1, 2, 3, 4? And I think likelihood is fairly self-explanatory. And I know there's subjective judgment applied in terms of determining the ratings. It would be useful to understand what's meant by quartile. Risk score obviously is a multiplication of the impact and the likelihood, but again it would be useful to know what do we mean by a risk score of 12 or a risk score of 16, whatever, you know, we sort of legends explaining that sort of stuff would be helpful.
So, okay, any further questions on this paper? Okay. Okay, thank you everyone for your attendance today. Thank you.
Thank you.